Hi, I'm Daniel, founder of Pretty Litter. Did you know cats tend to hide symptoms of sickness and pain? I learned this the hard way after losing my cat, Gingy. So I created Pretty Litter, a health monitoring litter that helps detect early signs of illness by changing colors, saving you money and potentially your cat's life. Pretty Litter is veterinarian developed, and it's the easiest way to keep tabs on your fur baby's health right at home.
Go to prettylitter.com and use code ACAST for 20% off your first order and a free cat toy. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Hudson. How are you? Welcome all to a game of my life with the Governor, Alan Hudson. Buddy, we're going to talk about the 1971 Cup Winners' Cup final in Athens. We're going to talk about the lead up to it and, you know, the aftermath and everything that surrounds Chelsea's first European conquest 50 years ago.
Yeah, it's amazing, really, and it's still a fantastic talking point of what happened. It was a record earth-breaking, shattering thing at Stamford Bridge. Really, they'd never seen nothing like it. It was a little bit along the lines of this lockdown season in many ways, a pandemic season, because the crowds were very sparse in Athens. They didn't know about the replay, when the replay was going to be. It was all a complete cock-up, much like the football is these days, with all these games played on ridiculous days. That's what happened in Athens. And it was, again, going back to the pub team thing. We started off in Greece. We started our first game in Greece against Salonika. And we found ourselves back there against the once greatest club team on earth.
Greece is the word. The Real Madrid team, that 2 evenings, because I did make one or two little changes, but Borgia was in goal, Luis Benito, Zocco Piri, Zuni Zinigua, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Grosso, Valaguez, Perez, Amaro, and the only name that I remember or recognise is Francisco Gento, who was one of the great Real Madrid players of the 50s, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was in with the great Di Stefano and Puskas and all them, and he played in that side. So, and it is a fun. Me and Johnny Boyle still laughing because Johnny Boyle marked him and he swapped shirts with him, and he had Hento's shirt, and he was drunk one night in America when he was in Tampa Bay, and he gave it away as a present to somebody. I said, "That's not what you do, John. You don't do things like that." He said, "Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time." And I said, "What would I?" You know, I can remember Hento coming on, and he forgot to take his watch off, which made me laugh. I thought, with all your experience, you don't come on the football field with your watch on. And he tossed it to the bench, and he was running along the line with the ball. It was like a Sunday game. It was like a game over the park. You know, I looked up because only because of the build-up and the youth are not knowing what was going on. It was quite funny, and a few of our boys, which we'll go on to, see it that way on the Thursday in between the games.
Yeah, and that was the first game, but they did make a change. Fleitas come on in the played in the second game instead of Perez, and Gento was on the bench. Manuel Bueno played, so that's where the watch comes from, that he wasn't quite prepared.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't prepared, but you know, I suppose being 65, he couldn't have done the 90 minutes. But the Johnny Ball scenario is fantastic when, you know, he tells people he marked Hento, and they all think he marked him when he was the real Hento. But it doesn't really tell the whole story. And the actual, what nobody ever touches on, and you know, we all love the success story, and it was a great feat what we did. But I think the key moment was when, and I watched it the other day. I didn't see him get injured, but not even a commentator knew about it. A commentator on it, he said, "Piri looks like he's holding his arm, like he's hurt his arm." Well, I see Piri come out the tunnel before the game with a half plaster cast on his arm from the first game. so he got injured, and that swung the game our way. You could see when they say about one player don't make a team, Pirri was the most incredible player, and I've looked him up and seen what a player he was for Real Madrid and Spain, and he showed that in the first game. He was magnificent, and you know, on a lower scale, you know, you've seen what Aston Villa are like without Jack Grealish for the last 12 games. Yeah. Well, this showed you in the replay that I said I can remember Charlie Cook and myself looking at each other and thought, well, this is our night, because, you know, I played with a broken arm. I played with a broken hand, in fact, against Ajax, and you just can't play 100% when you've got injuries like that. It just wouldn't be allowed to play in a modern day game. But he played this night with a very badly strapped arm, and that cost Real Madrid the game, I think.
Now, the first game, can you remember the Chelsea lineup, Al?
I could hazard a guess.
Yeah, go on. Let's.
Because I know David Webb and John Dempsey and Ron Harris played. I know Eddie McCready was injured, wasn't he?
Yes,
he didn't take part. Yep. He was having a torrid time with injuries at that time, and personal problems, I think, which we won't go into. But Eddie was a fantastic friend of mine, and I know he was having a bad time at that time. So I would imagine, had we bought Paddy Mallaghan by then?
Paddy was sub.
Paddy was sub. Well, Johnny Ball was right back.
Yep.
Yeah, Johnny Ball was one of those players today who would be worth his weight in gold, because he could play there and he could come into midfield and do a job. You know, he couldn't play up front because he was too small. But although Werner plays up front, but I think he was a better player than Werner. And obviously he couldn't play in goal. But John was a great utility player. Did John Hollins play?
Yep, John played in the first game. He didn't play in the second.
No, there's a very good story behind that as well. And then obviously Osgood, Tommy Baldwin, Keith Weller.
Didn't play in the first game. Tommy was sub for the first game.
Yeah.
Keith played.
Yeah. I only mentioned Tommy because I've seen flashes of the replay when he come on and done so well. And Nobby Houseman, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, and Charlie, and obviously yourself, and the great Peter Bonetti was in goal. In the second game, Tommy came in for John Hollins. John didn't play in the replay. The first game was on the 19th of May, and Dave gave you the day off on the Thursday, and you played on the Friday. 45,000 was the attendance in the first game. 19,917. I think the Madrid fans went home and the Chelsea fans slept rough in Athens and on the beach.
Yes, they did. That was, that was a time when if it happened today, well, it couldn't happen today. It's too ridiculous. Well, you could do it. Yeah, they'd have brought the VAR on to see what to do for the replay, but because we haven't really come forward. We have in years, but we haven't in intelligence. But at that time, we had the most incredible fans. I remember the year before, Manchester United fans told me that when we played the replay up at Old Trafford, they said that it was blue that night. It wasn't red. The Chelsea fans went up there in their droves and they took over Manchester. And when the push came to shove in Athens, that no one could believe that we had to stay over and play again on the Friday. All the boys, by all accounts, they only went for the one night and they were flying home that night or first thing in the morning. Next thing you know, they wanted to stay for the replay. So they all pulled their money. They all put their money in and they looked after each other. Some slept on the beach and stayed over and flew back the next day. And we were supposed to arrive back in Heathrow on the Thursday morning, and instead of that, we got back 2 days later on the Saturday morning. So that's how much of a cock-up that was.
Can you remember much of the first game? Because Oz scored 11 minutes into the second half in the 56th minute, and Zocco scored the equalising goal pretty much with the last kick of the game. He scored in the 90th minute.
Yeah. I can't remember too much. That they say when you play an FA Cup
Yeah.
final, embrace it. Sometimes it flies by, it goes over your head, and you wish you could play the game again. I remember I should have gone in the record books. I was through with a goalkeeper to beat, and a landing tackle smashed me to the ground. It should have been a penalty, but I would have scored had this fella not fouled me. So I'd have been in the record books as the first Chelsea scorer. And I carried that injury with me through the game. It was what we called, you must have had it. He scored dead leg.
Yeah.
They'd done me in the fire, and I was more concerned about. And I wasn't concerned throughout that game because I didn't know we were going to draw it, obviously, and go to a replay. But the game kind of passed us by, and it seemed to flash by, And when they scored in the last minute, it was. I really wouldn't. I would be telling you a lie if I knew what went through my mind. And the after match, I don't really know what we'd done after the match. I haven't got a clue. It was as if you was living some kind of dream, and you just woke up the next day, and I thought, my God, I missed last year's FA Cup final. I'm not going to miss a replay. And I didn't even tell them that I was injured. And I went to the flea market and tried to walk it off. And I thought the more I keep on the move, just how you keep, today you'd probably ice it and keep the hot and cold treatment, whatever, which we used to do. But I just thought by walking it off, and I walked it off, and then I come back to the hotel, and on the way I just stopped off at the Athens Hilton to have a look to, not that I wanted to go and swim, but when I looked by the poolside, I see 3 of our top players sitting there having a party. And that was on the Thursday lunchtime, which was, I said to Peter Osgood, you're supposed to celebrate after the game, Oz, not before. And he said, leave it to me. So that was enough.
But David said you can have the day off Thursday. I remember watching an interview with Peter Osgood, and he says, well, we just done what we usually do on a day off. We went and had a drink.
It's true. But he couldn't have a training session because at that stage, it was late May. We'd already played 50, 60 games that season with the FA Cup, the League Cup, and the league matches. It come to then got through to the final. We must have played 60 matches that season. So a training session weren't going to make any difference. A team talk wouldn't have made any difference because they didn't even know about the other team. He knew as much about the other team as what we did, and I'd never heard of Piri. And then you come up against a player like that when you haven't been told about him, and you find out. It was much like playing against Alan Ball in 1970 at Goodison, and he's, my God, what a performance. And then now we had to put up with this fella Piri, and he was magnificent. And you might say they were a bit short in other positions, and that's why all round again our spirit got us through.
But that Thursday round the pool in the Athens Hilton, there was us, Charlie Cook, and Johnny Baldwin. With Johnny Fennell as well was there, wasn't he? One of your pals?
Johnny Fennell, one of the most famous people that ever come out of Chelsea was a fella called Johnny Fennell, and he was a terrific footballer. He had lots of ability, like many of his generation.
Yeah,
he played in a cup. He played at Wembley in an amateur cup final with a fella called Billy Digweed, whose nephew still lives around here. So they had John knew what he'd like to play at Wembley. John was a big Chelsea supporter, and he was a big Charlie Cook fan. And they sat round. They had 2 tables pushed together to get all their drinks on it. There was so much alcohol on their table, and I always think to myself, it would have made a great, it's like the Marx Brothers. It would have made a great comedy if the Real Madrid manager and coaching team had walked into and see our players sitting there on a Thursday afternoon. They'd have thought, oh, well, they're not playing tomorrow, them 3. That's Andy, they're 3 of their best players, and that's Charlie Cook, Peter Osgood, and Tommy Baldwin. They're not playing tomorrow. Oh, that's good. And then all of a sudden, out they walk, and Osgood scores again.
Like only Oz could do.
only Oz could do it. He said to me, "Go." I said, "What are you doing?" He says, he's going back to what's going on. And he said to me, "Look, you've got a knock on your leg, son. Walk it off and go home and have an early night because you got to do my running for me tomorrow. And in return, I'll score." And he did.
And you was just 19, so you were still a teenager, Al. 21st of May was the replay. That was, a month before your 20th birthday. You must have been one of the youngest players, British players, to have been in a cup-winning side in Europe.
Yeah, maybe. I've never really looked it up, and I think I'd come a long, long way. What happened to me in Europe was probably one of the great experiences to play against probably one of the greatest players in the world at that time. We played in Bruges in Belgium, and they had a fabulous team, and they should have knocked us out over there in Belgium. They beat us 2-0. They should have beat us 8-0.
Yeah.
Our goalkeeper John Phillips was out of this world. And they had Robbie Rensenbrink on the left wing, and he was known as the George Best on that side of Europe. And he was a magnificent player. He really was. And, just the experience alone, it's like when football fans talk about football, and I say, well, you don't know until you've been on the field with them. Yeah. And they say, yes, we do. We can see on telly, or we was at the game, but you really don't know until you've been close up and personal with these people. That the Robbie Rensenbrink was, you've seen George Best on telly, haven't you? With the goal against West Ham, we beat about 5 players in no space, and he scored. The football fans think they know how that happened, but they don't. You actually had to be on that field with him to see the genius, and I suppose it's like all these Spaniards tell their grandchildren what it's like to try and get the ball off Lionel Messi. A spectator might think they know how to do it, but they don't.
But you're absolutely right, Al, and you hear so many times on the radio where the pro will say, yeah, but you've never played the game, and sometimes it winds the fan up. They go, oh, I've played the game. You played in a Sunday league team or for your school team. This is a different level, and you're spot on. Unless you've played the game and played against those players, you do not know how great those players are.
Well, and on top of it, Paul, it's on top of it, and it's something that I've always said in our issues. It's there's a difference between a club player and an international player. It's a step up. It's this is why the Grealish thing kept cropping up at the beginning, because they said, well, he won't be able to do it at that level. And I've always said that the bigger the stage you put this kid on, the better he's going to be. And you could see he just oozes the confidence that he wants to play on that big stage. Give me the ball. And he don't put his shin pads on and pull his socks up when he plays thing. He plays exactly the same way as he would if he was in the back streets. And that's what you call genius. And when you play against people like that, I got a friend in London. I'd said to him about 3 years ago about this Grealish. He said, yeah, but he keeps falling over. I said, you're quiet. I said, he's from Dublin, Mickey Heffernan. He's a very, very intelligent man. And I said, Mick, for someone intelligent, what are you talking about? You just don't know nothing about football. You support Manchester United. You talk about George Best. You know George Best. You know Dennis Law. You know these people. You know Paul McGrath. But you don't know nothing about football. Jack Grealish doesn't fall over all the time. He encourages people to tackle him where they shouldn't tackle him. Do you not understand? And then 3 years on, he's still saying the same thing. Yeah, but he still falls over. He doesn't fall over. He don't fall over. I said he gets up and he picks up the ball, looks at the other player and he says, thank you for that, and takes a quick free kick in a dangerous area. Do you understand it? But some people you just can't educate.
They don't know. If he keeps falling over, I'd go to the doctors because clearly you've got
Yeah.
low blood pressure.
Yeah,
He gets
yeah,
kicked.
yeah, and you've got no balance. You know, he's got the
Absolutely.
greatest balance. When he's got the ball at his feet, he's got the most superb balance. So why would he be on the floor all the time?
Oh,
He's big. And they said the other night when he came on for the last quarter of an hour of the game, they said although he's been out for 12 weeks, he's still the most fouled player in the Premier
it's
League.
incredible.
Well, that tells you a story alone. Why do they keep fouling him?
But
Because they can't. The only way to stop him.
exactly, and another stupid thing that they say
Yeah,
is, well, what Villa do? They always give Jack the ball. Well, that's common
yeah,
sense. Every
absolutely.
football team, when you got the ball for Chelsea, you'd always look for Osgood because you know that if
Yeah,
Ozzy's got the ball, there's more chance of Chelsea scoring, and hence the goal in all the big games. Ozzy
yeah,
always delivered because
absolutely.
he was a superstar and the
Yeah,
greatest centre forward that we had in this country,
yeah,
probably the world at the time. But that
yeah.
game, you're right, against Bruges, coming back on the plane, what was it like? Was it just that feeling of, geez, how did we get away with that? We can still do these in the replay back at the bridge, but it is a big, big ask.
Well, it's funny you should ask the question because that's a question that nobody's ever asked me. You know, because I remember talking to Bill Folks about the Munich air crash, and I had to be very touchy.
Yeah.
He was but he was fantastic about it, and he told me how he felt, and no one's ever asked me what was it like, the feeling coming back from Bruges, knowing that you're going home, and it was the first time that we hadn't stayed over. I remember we flew back because it was such a short trip, I suppose. We flew back that night, and I remember sitting on the aeroplane having a beer and looking out the window and staring into the abyss, I suppose, and I think I'm wondering how on earth we got away with 2-0. I really couldn't believe. And John Phillips, on my life, he should have got a special medal that night because it was. If you see when people speak about Schmeichel when he played at Newcastle that night and he stopped an avalanche, this was John Phillips in Bruges, and it was a performance and a half he put in, and we would have been dead and buried. We would have been beat 5, 6, 7, or it wouldn't have been worth even turning up at the bridge for the second leg. But we come away there 2-0. Osgood had been out for 8 weeks, suspended for playing up with referees and talking back to referees, telling them what they really are. And then he was back after 8 weeks for the replay. So that kind of if he hadn't have played in the replay, we were out.
Yeah.
We would never come back from a 2-0 deficit against Bruges.
And you're right, that's what Oz gave Chelsea. I mean, you've said before
Yeah.
on podcasts, you saved our skin more times than your average dermatologist.
Absolutely. And plus the fact, when you see in the modern day, this might have applied to us that night. We might have had 85% possession against Bruges at Stamford Bridge and not scored because we had no Osgood.
Yeah.
And this is why teams today have 80% possession because they got nothing up front. This is why Fulham got relegated. We said they'd go down the first game of the season. They have 80% possession because they got nothing up front to stick the ball in the net. They got a centre forward who scores in the Championship, but stepping up to that level in the Premier League, and I think he scored 1 goal a season or 2 goals. The kid, and that is why this Werner again yesterday, 45 million or 50 million they paid. Where do they get these players from? As we were watching the game yesterday, I said, well, what would Jimmy Greaves have been worth today? My God, why do you Chelsea supporters keep sticking up for this fella and say, look, he's no good? If he was on trial at Chelsea, they would have sent him back.
Yeah.
But because somebody upstairs with a suit on paid all this money for him, they got to persevere with him.
And that's what happens. But that perseverance in 1971 with Osgood, it was 2-0 after full time, going into extra time. You ran out winners 4-0. And as shell shocked as you guys must have been going back to the bridge from Bruges, they must have been absolutely shell shocked going back from from Stamford Bridge to Bruges, because when you've got a team like that, you've absolutely outrun them, you've absolutely outplayed them. You should have got more than 2 goals taken into the next leg. To come back getting beat 4-0, they just must have been absolute shot.
Well, absolutely, and I think we know how they felt, because the following year as holders, we got knocked out by a Swedish team, and on the aggregate score over 2 legs, it should have been about 16-1. They had 1 shot in 2 games, and that was the one that knocked us out. And so they must have thought, if only John Phillips hadn't have had that game, or why didn't we take our chances in Belgium? How they never went through. And they were, as I say, whoever won the European Cup that year, Bruges would have beat them. They were the best team in the competition. That night at Stamford Bridge, they still talk about it being the best night they've ever had there, because they didn't believe, and the only belief they had, and obviously I don't know if Waddington was in the crowd, but that's why I wanted to break the record to buy Osgood when nobody else wanted him. There's only one player in the country at that time that could have got us through, and it was him.
And previous round, you went to Sofia to play CSKA, who had a magnificent home record, as did all of those Eastern Europeans. Going there behind the Iron Curtain, that was a bloody tall ask. But you ran out 1-0 winners in both games against Sofia, didn't you?
Yeah, well, that kind of suited that suited us. I think sometimes it's probably like the boy-girl situation. You see a beautiful girl at the other side of the bar, and you don't know them, and you don't think you got any chance, but then all of a sudden, that was us. We didn't know anything about CSKA. We didn't even know anything about all our opponents. There was no Sky TV. We couldn't read up about them. We never thought about that. We just thought we'd take every game as it comes and take our chances. It was a pub team attitude again, and with the spirit. If we could beat Leeds the year before, then we could beat anybody, was the way we looked at it. Not knowing that the quality of these teams that we were playing was fantastic. They were such a good side. Apart from the first game against Salonika, where we drew 1-1, the teams were superb, and the only team that I knew we'd beat was Manchester City in the semi-final, who were the holders.
And that leads us nicely to that semi-final, because they were the holders of the Cup Winners' Cup. They were also the holders of the FA Cup, wasn't they, in 69? And that's how they got there in 70, won it, and then you played them in the semi-final in 71. Again, 2 close games, 1-0, 1-0.
Yeah, I remember. I knew we'd beat them as soon as they ran out, because they had shirts on like the tablecloths in my favourite restaurant. They were like the most diabolical shirts, and they didn't look like the Manchester City that won the league a couple of years before. That fantastic team, one of the best teams I've ever seen. And I see them play at Craven Cottage one day, and the football under Allison and Mercer, they were fantastic. But they were coming to the end of Summerby and all them, Colin Bell and whatever. But we beat them easy. We beat them. They were the easiest 1-0 games we ever had, and we went to Manchester having won the first leg 1-0, and it was a breeze really. I don't know. It's just I do believe sometimes, like Leicester winning the FA Cup yesterday, I do believe sometimes your name's on it. Yeah.
You're right, and again, rolling on to modern day, Chelsea in another big final against Manchester City.
Well, they're going to now. This manager has come under scrutiny after yesterday. We did a podcast the other week with thanks to you, with Dennis Mortimer, and he talked about how Villa won the European Cup with not one international in the team. I was talking about the backwall, the Stoke situation with Greenough not getting a cap, and he said, "Well, we won the European Cup." I mean, that just about sums the national team up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
What a team that was as well. What a brilliant football team they were at that time, and they won it by playing football. They didn't do it like Wimbledon beating Liverpool and Wimbledon getting their success with Vinnie Jones and all that lot. The Aston Villa were a terrific football team, and obviously Dennis was the captain. And he said, "Yeah, how?" He said, "We won. We didn't have an international team," which just sums up the FA and the selectors and the management of the country. They used to pick teams from Manchester United and Liverpool and Arsenal and whoever's at the top of the league, whoever ran the league at that time, they were the nucleus of the team. 6 Manchester United players, 5 Liverpool players. That's what it used to be.
You're absolutely spot on, Al, because apart from '66 and we won it in our own backyard, England have never won a major tournament, be it the Euros or the World Cup. However,
well, I got to pull you up on that, mate. We've never reached the final.
we haven't.
No, we haven't even reached the final.
It's incredible.
It's an incredible. I told you about this chap that phoned me from Greece the other day, from Athens, and I said, we haven't reached the final since 1966. Yet Greece have won the European Championships. I fancied them to win it. I said to my friend round the corner, Billy Hawley, he said to me, you napped them at 50-1. I said, I will see them play England when Beckham scored the free kick against them in the World Cup. Yeah. I said, this team are a big threat in the European Championships next year. They won it. Denmark come in as a wild card. They won it, Denmark. Yeah. And we haven't, with all these so-called great players that we had, we've never got to a final. And it sums up the FA, and it sums up the managers along the way, the managers who pick certain players.
Absolutely spot on, Al, because we have won every European Cup, club European Cup, since the 60s, since it started. So we've had massive success at club level, but none at international level. That can't be coincidence.
I know. But the one thing, which the misleading stat about that is the reason being is that they were British. They weren't English.
Yeah, that's very true.
They were English clubs, but the likes of Liverpool wouldn't have won the league without the likes of Dalglish.
Yeah, very good
point. You look at Leeds when they were at their best. You got your Bremner and Giles. There wasn't 2 English midfield players like that. Yeah. They were Scottish and Irish, and all the top teams. It meant the great Manchester United team, the Paddy Crerand from Scotland. They wouldn't have won it. I mean, Clough done it with really. He won it with a pub team, didn't he?
Yeah.
I don't know. This is one of the great mysteries of all time. How Brian Clough won the European Cup twice with that team. Incredible.
Yeah. I mean, Terry Curran, who do a regular podcast says to me, Derby and Forest, because he played for both. Derby were the better team than Forest, but they just had Brian Clough, and Clough was an absolute genius. Going into the replay, so everything's set up for the second game, 2 days after. The boys have sobered up.
No, not quite.
What was it like leading into the game? What was the dressing room like before the game?
I think they scored in the last kick of the match, so we were still kind of half deflated. And that was a game when we always laugh, don't we, on the show? The funny thing about it, I think I told you the story that I was watching the news one morning, and young Chris Hollins was on. Yeah. John Hollins, his son, and he was doing the sports on BBC, and there was the European Cup final that night, and the fellow who was doing the news said, well, now we'll hand you over to Chris Hollins, who's doing the sport. And he said, oh, by the way, Chris, he says, your father played in the European Cup final, didn't he? He said, well, it was actually the Cup Winners' Cup final. He did. He said he played in the first leg, but never played in the second leg. He says, and on the Wednesday night of the first game, he phoned my mum up, Linda, and he said, Linda, I won't be able to make the wedding tomorrow. She said, what do you mean? He said, because we drew tonight and they're keeping us over to play on Friday. So she said, no. She said, you can't stay. You're best man at this wedding. So he said, well, the football does come before the wedding, love, because it pays the bills. So, and he was telling the whole nation this on BBC. So that was how comical the whole situation was. And now we're in the dressing room the next day, and we have a reshuffle. Luckily, John Ollins John Boyle told me this the other couple of years ago, and the more I think about it, it's true. John Ollins should have played right back really, and just left because me and Charlie Cook played in midfield that night on our own, and we knew we had to be at our best because of Pirri. And once we see Pirri wasn't 100%, then that kind of lifted us a little bit more, But I watched a little bit. I've watched little bits and pieces of it, and I think I've read their side of it. Some quotes from the Real Madrid camp, and they said they were the better team and deserved to win, but I don't think so. I think we were terrific.
But again, sometimes they do that, don't they? We were unlucky. We should have won. Do you know what? You didn't. Look at the game on both sides. Going back to that old, green-eyed monster, the bias that comes out instead of being truthful and saying, do you know what? We were beaten by the better team. Chelsea ran out 2-1 winners, and first goal scored by your mate John Dempsey.
Well, John Dempsey was. I think I picked an all-time best Chelsea team the other month, and John Dempsey was in it. I'm a little bit biased myself here because I was one as a kid. I was a Fulham supporter, and he was the Fulham centre half. But I didn't really rate him that highly when he was at Fulham. But when he came into our team at Chelsea, we made our debut together at Chelsea in a 5-0 hiding at Southampton, and then 6 months later we won the FA Cup, and then 18 months later we win the European Cup Winners' Cup. And I don't think in them 18 months I see him really do anything wrong. He was just one of those players that you could, he's like, I said the other day of this Kante that played for Leicester, and it was again yesterday. He was superb yesterday. He was on the wrong team yesterday. He should have stuck with Leicester. He never puts a foot wrong. There's certain players that their standards are so high, and John Dempsey I love for that. And apart from that, I love about him because he's such a level-headed, modest person. And I think I've told you the story that he looked after handicapped children when he packed up, and for 20 years before retiring. And anyone, you read about these superstars today and how they live their life, and he lived on a shoestring looking after handicapped children. So I think that said a lot for, we talk about upbringings and everything else and where you come from, and I think that speaks volumes for him. And I'm sure you'll want to do a podcast with him because he's a very interesting fella. And I'll tell you what, one great story I love about this is a fella who got the first goal, and it was a volley that if it had been Jack Grealish, everyone would have went, "No, that was stunning," Yeah. He was a centre half, but when he was playing for Fulham, he had the weirdest, the silliest sense of humour. And but he was the life and soul of our dressing room. And the Vic Buckingham, I think it was manager. And Vic Buckingham said to him one day, he said, "If you're late one more time," he said, "I'm going to fine you." And John Dempsey said, "I can't help it if I'm late." He said, "If there's traffic and everything, these are the days, unlike today. There wasn't like today where you get into training an hour before and prepare. These were days. It was like, again, the pub team attitude." And he got to Craven Cottage this morning, and in them days, they fined you a £5 because he was only on about 18, 19, £20 a week, I suppose, in the first division. And he called him in, and John got to Craven Cottage at 10:25. He parked his car and he sat in his car till 11:25 to be late, so Vic Buckingham would fine him. So Vic Buckingham called him in. He said, "I told you yesterday about I'd fine you if you were late again." And he pulled £5 worth of farthings out of his pocket in a silver wrapper, and he put him on his desk. He said, "There's your £5." He said, "If it bothers you that much about me being late, there's more important things in the world." He said, "I can only apologise for being late." I mean, the thing the other day was this boomerang. Arsenal manager Arteta had to teach him a lesson and leave him out the other week because he was late. He said, well, that Tuchel said when I had him, he said I used to tell him that the meeting was a quarter of an hour ahead, so he would turn up on time. There are ways around this, and that was the way that Johnny Dempsey got his point across to Buckingham. If you need a fiver that bad, have it. But why not judge me on what I do on a Saturday afternoon? Well,
it wasn't late in Athens. It was bang on time, and you're right. What a fantastic volley. 33 minutes, Chelsea 1-0 up, and 6 minutes later, in 39th minute, Osgood, as he'd said to you in the Athens Hilton the day before, young good, you go home and have an early night because you're going to do my running and I'll score. Bang on the money. Timing again. Oz delivers.
It wasn't so much. I've watched it again the other night. It wasn't so much he scored. I see Werner miss a goal against Real Madrid the other week from the 6 on the edge of 6-yard box, and the commentator said, well, it did come at him a bit quickly. Well, Peter Osgood scored this goal from about 20, just outside the box. He just turned, swiveled, and slotted it in the corner from 22 yards or something. It was such great composure, just a stroke of genius that Osgood had. And yet they're making excuses for these players who've been transferred for 45, 50, 60 million. I'll give him time to settle in. Well, settling into Peter Osgood and Charlie Cook and Tommy Baldwin was let them go in the Hilton before the game and let them have a few drinks. That was settling in. And John Dempsey, he was trying to make a case that, I could score as well. If you put me centre forward, and he told me that once. He said he played centre forward for Fulham for about half a dozen games, and I think he scored about 8 goals. So it was nothing new to him. He was just an exceptional centre half.
And in the 75th minute, Sebastian Fleitas, who was on the bench for the first game, started in the second game and scored a goal, 2-1. 15 minutes to go. What was it like then? Was that a bit shaky? Have you any memories about when that ball went in and thinking, Jesus, it's Real Madrid. They come back before. Is lightning going to strike twice in Athens?
Well, it's the Osgood effect again, isn't it? Had we not got the second goal and it would have gone 1-0, I think it might have swung in their favour. Yeah. But again, it was had Perry been fit, it would have swung in their favour. But it was all. I think again, with taking the Bruce thing into how we got out of Belgium alive, and our name was written on that cup. There's no doubt about it. Johnny Dempsey probably scored 1 goal that season.
Yeah. Probably.
And that was it, and it was a fantastic goal. It was a treasure, it was a treasure. I'd rather score 1 goal a season, it would be John Dempsey's, than 10, and they all be tap-ins. Yeah. No matter what Gary Lineker or Alan Shearer says, I would rather treasure that goal and tell my grandchildren about that. Watch that, because that was just, there wasn't no fluke about it. John Dempsey was that good.
Absolutely. The celebrations after, Al, it must have just felt like, again, from them scoring that late goal in the first game, from scoring 15 minutes from time in the second, you're holding on, all hands to the pump, etc., etc. When the referee blew that final whistle, you must have been like them Leicester players, dead on your feet, on the floor, but then jump up like a bunny because you've won the cup. And that euphoria, that adrenaline boost must have been able to make you run from Athens back to Stamford Bridge.
Well, it was. I've got a photograph on the side. I'm looking at it now of me and Marvin Hinton and Stuart Houston, who was at Arsenal with George Graham. Stuart didn't play, but he was in the squad, holding the Cup Winners' Cup, and we looked so relaxed. It's unbelievable. Yeah. And I think it was more relief that was the end of the competition, because it was one of so many ups and downs, and we loved going into Europe. It was like going on holiday every other week, I think that's the way we looked at it as well. And I think we said in another one of our shows that I think we had about 4 or 5 divorces that year, with players, with air hostesses and this, that and the other. So it was more than, it really would have made, they got this thing on television called Benidorm now. They reckon it's funny. Well, they should have had our show on there of going in the European Cup Winners' Cup show because it was unbelievable. And that led to the following year, and we run riot, with Blue is a colour, and it was then that Pan's People come into play, and I went down my local restaurant after, and there's 4 Pan's People down there with our players, So that was a kind of bunch of players that we had, There was the King's Road effect, I suppose, and I think that night, I can remember, the last thing I can remember that night was about 5 o'clock in the morning, sit on the end of my bed with a picture of Peter Osgood, his arms raised after his goal, and me coming up to give him a hug. And that was the last thing I can remember about Athens, and looking over the tops of all the houses as the sun come up. I don't think I went to sleep. We celebrated until we couldn't celebrate no more. I think we was exhausted. And I can remember we went to the Fulham Town Hall, which I don't know what we were doing there, because we were Chelsea Football Club, but that sums that up. And I remember meeting my uncle for a celebration drink in my local pub. I was there on my own, and he walked in the pub, and my head was on a table, and I was passed out. I'd blacked out with exhaustion. Yeah. So that it was an exhausting. This is something that the FA and FIFA don't never take in. How could they let players play 2 games in 3 days like that? God knows how they must have felt, Real Madrid, after going through all that and then getting home having been beaten. Yep. As you say, we were flying. We didn't need an aeroplane to get home. Really, we could have flown home on our own. It was an incredible experience, and I don't think we were given the credit that was due. They still play Blue as a colour at Stamford Bridge, and the supporters down there don't know what it's all about.
It's incredible, isn't it? And that Chelsea blue shirt that Boilers gave away in a moment of a drunken situation and state. Well, you gave yours away, but in a completely different manner and way, didn't you?
Well, I did. I thought he'd gone to a grave, my friend's grave, and it was quite something that I got it back. And I really wish it had gone to the grave, to be perfectly honest, to keep my friend warm, because he died too young. And to think that you were out there, I got the phone call the day after winning it, and Christine Matthews, our secretary, she said, we had a phone call, a friend of yours is very, very ill, and I took my shirt up, and he was in a wheelchair, and I just draped my shirt over him and said, you always wanted to play for Chelsea. Well, you did. You played last night, Dennis, and I was led to believe he got buried in the shirt, and I wanted him to get buried in the shirt, and it would have went to a better place, to a rightful place, and he was such a lovely kid as well. And it just shows you the two sides of life. There I am, a young man. Dennis was maybe a year older than me. I used to see him in the pub a lot, in the Lord Palmerston, with the Mancinis, had the big boxing family, and it was almost, when he spoke to you, that he looked at you with stars in his eyes. If only I could have played with Chelsea. Well, I knew that shirt went to the right place, and when I walked in, it kind of, from winning the European Cup Winners' Cup, and you're on such a high, and then come down, smash into the ground after seeing him. I think he died about 3 days later, and it really was crashing down to earth, and it shows you what it's all about, really, what life's all about in a short space of time. But it's funny how his family asked for me. I suppose he might have wanted it, mainly because I was a local boy. And the local boy made good. I suppose Ozzy would have given his shirt. Charlie would have probably sold his shirt to him. Come to that, I think Ozzy would have as well. He sold everything else. He sold his FA Cup final medals. I know that. But that was a wonderful thing about that era, because it was. I think I wrote in one of my books, and somebody commented on it. It was like the Budgie area, Adam Faith and all that down the King's Road. Ian Hutchinson from Burton, and they're all local. They're all, we were great. It made you very proud to, I don't know how Jock Stein must have felt having win the European Cup with all Glasgow Regions in his team. I mean, what a incredible feat that was. But we were just all lads from all over Britain that got thrown together. From Tommy from Gateshead, Charlie come down from Dundee. We had lads from Battersea, one from Chelsea. And then when I went to Stoke, they had a tougher back four, and they were all from Stoke-on-Trent. So it makes you wonder. Arsenal have never had a decent back four. However many foreigners they bring into this country to play for Arsenal, they will never have a back four like they did with the four British. English lads at the back.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
And again,
incredible.
It takes all sorts, doesn't it, to build a team?
Yeah, of course it does.
All sorts. Uddy, what a fantastic trip down memory lane. Is there going to be, finally, I know that there was a reunion last year, 50 years after Chelsea won the FA Cup. One Alan Hudson didn't get an invite, absolutely disgraceful. Is there any talks that there's going to be, another reunion with the boys of 71?
No, there's. I've had a few people get in touch with me and ask if we do podcast. The podcast is the in thing now at the moment. Yep. But to be perfectly honest, Osgood died too young, Houseman died too young, Hutchinson died too young. It's just the sign of the times.
Keith Weller as well, of course.
And Keith Weller was only with us for a year, but what an impact he had. You couldn't even have a reunion because the people who played such a big part in it wouldn't be there, and I don't like them things when the main people are not there.
Yeah, sure.
I'd rather meet on a different, and I don't particularly like all our players. That's a problem. That's a problem I have. I was going down I'm going down next week to see Tommy Baldwin, who's in Eastbourne, and he's not very well. Yeah. He's very, very ill, and I'm going down to see him next week. And Johnny Ball's coming down with me, and I'd rather that happen than Chelsea throw a party which isn't from the heart.
Yeah,
it's just for their promotional suits at Chelsea. But I'd rather see the lads on my own and talk about what you and I talk about over the airwaves.
Absolutely. And you're going to be doing another podcast with Tony Jimenez with your wonderful Alan Hudson podcast. I think they're absolutely magnificent. Takes it to another level also. Can I wish you and Tony and everybody, thanks for listening, all the very best. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Those were the days, my friend.
Yes, and they've not really ended, have they?
We keep talking about them, buddy.
Yeah, and what a nice way to spend a Sunday afternoon after Leicester won the cup. And I said before the game, I did an interview for Stoke Radio, and I said you might find afterwards they might be looking at this as a little bit on a lower scale to the Munich air crash, because Leicester did it yesterday for the owner that died.
Yeah.
And I think they pulled a little bit extra out than Chelsea for this fella.
Yeah.
I've actually got the paper in front of me now. Do it for Vishai.
Yeah.
And they did it for him yesterday, and that couldn't have been nicer. I bet his son was very, very proud sitting there yesterday. And it makes the game all worthwhile. It makes you forget about VAR. It makes you forget about all the idiots in the game. It makes you forget about the FA and FIFA. That was just such a wonderful ending to the FA Cup yesterday. And for Jamie Vardy to be the only player to have played in every round for from like when it starts on a Sunday or something. And I said to my mate Peter Millard yesterday, I must tell you, we'll end on this. I said to Peter yesterday, Peter's one of my best friends. He's a lovely man, but he's 82 now, and we was having a drink, and as the camera went on to Jamie Vardy, I said, Peter, do you realise he's played in every round? The only man to play in every round in the FA Cup. And he said to me, what, for the same team? and then I knew it was going to be one of them days. What a wonderful line.
Oh, and what a wonderful way to go out as well.
He said, what, for the same team? I went, don't worry, please. It's all right. Don't worry.
Oh, none of vodka and orange, please.
Yeah, same again. Same again.
Top man, Al, as always,
All
been
right,
a
mate.
pleasure, pal. Speak
All
soon.
right, pal.
Cheers,
Thanks,
Al.
mate.
Bye-bye now.
Bye, mate.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Daniel, founder of Pretty Litter. Cats and cat owners deserve better than any old-fashioned litter. That's why I teamed up with scientists and veterinarians to create Pretty Litter. Its innovative crystal formula has superior odor control and weighs up to 80% less than clay litter. Pretty Litter even monitors health by changing colors to help detect early signs of potential illness. It's the world's smartest kitty litter.
Go to prettylitter.com and use code ACAST for 20% off your first order and a free cat toy. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details.